Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you for attending today's career panel, and my name is Matthew Musgrave, the ASAP President and ECRS Coordinator, and I would like to welcome our career panel on behalf of the ECRS Organizing Committee, which spans a range of scientific fields as well as career backgrounds, including academia, industry, government research, and education. If you please just wave your hand as I introduce you. First, we have Dr. Kathleen Flint Ehm, who is Director of Graduate and Postdoctoral Professional Development in the Graduate School at Stony Brook University. Dr. Flint has over a decade's experience in postdoctoral policy and professional education for PhDs. She's also served as the founding director for Stony Brook's Office of Integration of Research, Education, and Professional Development. We also have Dr. James Hainfeld. He is the president and founder and chief research scientist of Nanoprobes, a nanoparticle research collaborative dedicated to finding nanoparticle treatments for cancer and other diseases. Dr. Hainfeld also holds a joint appointment as a guest scientist at Brookhaven National Lab and adjunct professor at Stony Brook University. He has over 25 patents and more than 150 reviewed publications. We also have Dr. Robert Konik, chair of the Condensed Matter Physics and Materials Science Division here at Brookhaven National Laboratory. He oversees the activities of roughly 60 scientists in the division engaged in study of basic and applied aspects of materials and their uses and properties. He is also an adjunct professor at Boston College, an associate editor at the Journal of Physical Review B, and an honorary researcher at the London Center for Nanotechnology. Dr. Timothy O'Connor is the executive president of the Rockefeller Institute. In his role, he oversees most university operations, including research support, technology transfer, facilities, and information technology. Dr. O'Connor also serves on the board of several not-for-profit organizations, including the New York Structural Biology Center, the Aaron Diamonds AIDS Research Center, New York Bio, and Friends of the East River Esplanade. And then Dr. Aleida Perez. She's a member of the Office of Educational Programs here at Brookhaven National Laboratory, where she oversees the high school research program and STEM Prep Summer Institute, in addition to teaching secondary lessons at BNL. Together with scientists at NSLS2, Dr. Perez mentors students and teachers on how to conduct research. She has also worked previously as a virologist in industry. And with that, we would like to invite anyone in the audience up to ask questions. Of course, we would like to keep this panel as more of a discussion, so please, and informal, so. And if no one would like to start off, I can always go. Yes.
So maybe you could start by just telling us how you got into your current position from wherever you were previously. How did you hear about your job, and how did you go about applying for it?
All right, I'll start. So I'm supposed to turn it towards me. Okay. Can you guys hear me in the back? Okay, so I'm a PhD astronomer by training. So once upon a time, I was all of you, wondering about what I was going to be when I grew up. I sort of departed from doing research as a AAA Science and Technology Policy Fellow at NSF. That was sort of my first taste of doing science, but not in a research context. And so that ended up taking me into the world of doing policy, doing education, and I came to Stony Brook 4 years ago, I suppose, where it was an opportunity where Stony Brook was really taking a new look at ways to integrate research, education, and professional development for our graduate students, our postdocs, and our undergraduate students. So it was an opportunity to build something new from scratch that really fit my skills, and so anyways, that's why I am where I am today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Hainfeld. I got a PhD in biochemistry and biophysics, and then actually got a job here at Brookhaven National Lab in the biology department as a biophysicist, and worked here actually for 32 years. And I got started with making gold nanoparticles and actually got on the cover of Science. And after that, I started getting these phone calls from Australia saying, oh, please send us some, and so forth. So it occurred to me maybe start a company. So I did start a company called Nanoprobes, and eventually moved over there 100%, where we manufacture, produce a lot of those nanoparticles, and also do some applications to cancer research.
So how did I become chair of condensed matter material science? Well, there was a certain amount of serendipity. Before, normally there's a couple layers of admin in the division. There's just the scientists, there's group leaders, and then there's the chair. And before, up to 2014, I was just a member of the condensed matter theory group. And because of various personnel, people leaving the division who were meant to become the next chair. Actually, it was John Hill, who's now the director of the NSLS2, because he took that position. They needed somebody to take the chair, and so it just happened to land on me. So there's a certain amount of serendipity to how I got my position. You could say there's a certain amount of serendipity on why I'm even here to begin with. Maybe to sort of go back to a time closer to your age, when I was an undergrad, I spent a number of summers at Bell Labs, and Bell Labs was sort of one of the places in the US to do condensed matter research. And so it was a very, very exciting place to be, to do summer research. And because of that experience, I decided to do a PhD in theoretical physics versus a PhD in something else. And so sort of just chance, I would say, has determined my career path to a large degree.
So yeah, I'll actually pick up on that theme because it's consistent with my experience, which I could talk about how I came into this current position, but it's really been a similar in all of the transitions I've had is less about what you often hear early in life is thinking about a career more like a game of pool, not just the next shot, but the shot after that and the shot after that. And I've really just had to completely abandon that metaphor. It's really been much more just opportunistic. And if anything, the theme that I've landed on, in addition to certainly following your passion and following what you want to do, is opportunistic. Finding opportunities and then taking advantage of them. And the theme that I've developed is sort of just making sure you're working with great people at great places, trying to do good things. And I think as long as you're doing that, you'll find lots of opportunities. The current one, I'm in New York. I happen to have been in New York before being at Yale, so I moved 4.5 years ago from Yale back to New York. Part of its geography, one of the things I love is New York City, so that was great. As a biologist, being at Rockefeller University was just a stunning opportunity, a very humbling opportunity. And then finally, the president who recruited me, who's now moved on and is currently the president at Stanford, we just hit it off so perfectly right from the time we met, personally and professionally. So I just viewed it again as a great opportunity, as I had in other transitions earlier in my career.
Hi, I'm a trained biologist, so I used to work in industry for a number of years. And then I decided back in 2007 that I just simply wanted to follow something that I was passionate about, which was education. So I switched careers, basically, and I went to teach at a college, microbiology, for many years. And then my spouse, who's also a scientist, we moved from Lawrence Livermore National Lab to here. And so following him and following the family in Brookhaven Labs, and I didn't know that it had an educational office. Actually, I did not know that National Labs had an educational office until I came to Brookhaven Labs. And so it seemed a natural fit for me to be part of the community here in OEP. And so I do a lot of outreach with the teachers. I do a lot of outreach with students. And I also try to find mentorships for high school students through the summer. So it's a very rewarding experience.
Okay, I have a question for Dr. Hainfeld. What was the difficulty in starting your own company while also having a research position at the same time?
Well, like I said, I got a lot of inquiries about, can you provide this material? So, and I couldn't really do it at Brookhaven. So one thing that has to be resolved is intellectual property. So like if you're working at some place and then you start a company, the place where you work kind of questions, well, are you stealing technology? Are you making a profit off of that? And so forth like that. So there was actually some substantial meetings and so forth. I don't think Brookhaven had gone through that process before. And so finally, after sort of investigating licensing and so on and so forth, they did approve you know, a startup while I continued to work at Brookhaven, because it kind of carved out a particular, you know, had to define the areas that the company would be working in. So that was probably the biggest hurdle. And by the way, Stony Brook and also Brookhaven, they do have the Center for Biotechnology, and they have resources for helping you to start a company if you're interested in that vein. There's also the Small Business Development Center run by the state that helps you develop a business plan, and all kinds of like free advice really that would help you. We started out at the Stony Brook Incubator, which is on campus at Stony Brook University, and it has rooms that you can rent with laboratory hoods if you need them. And so it makes it very convenient to actually get started with sort of a scientific laboratory. So I would, if anybody's interested in a startup, certainly become aware of all the resources that are here at both Brookhaven and Stony Brook for doing so.
And I'm going to jump in on the end of that because we were just talking about this a moment ago, but for any of you who are students or postdocs out at Stony Brook, we've been hearing a lot of interest about this, and we're actually thinking about building one of these sort of small one-credit classes on some of the challenges, how to navigate IP, starting a business plan, those sorts of things involved in doing a startup or joining a startup. So if any of you are interested, let me know, because it's all in the planning phases. Want to start at the other end this time?
Yeah.
Sure. Our office, we do have 2 sites at the laboratory where we do informal lessons to K-12 students. So usually we start at around 9 o'clock, because we start with the school when the school starts. And in our office, then lessons can go all the way until about 3 o'clock or something, until the school ends. For me, because I interact with the teachers more often, or we have experiments at the NSLS2, when our teachers buy proposals to the NSLS2 and they get rewarded time and get beam time, then it becomes a whole day affair for us. Because we bring the students, we bring the teachers, they're on the floor doing the experiments, and if it's a 24-hour allotment, where they are typically the whole day doing the work. And then we tend to support the teachers as needed throughout the day in terms of meetings and scientific data analysis and so on. So the day, it's pretty much that. Support the teachers, support the students, and then our group does the informal lessons at the laboratory.
So actually, one of the things I like about my job is the unpredictability. I often don't know what's going to be the biggest or most important thing I do that day. Again, I'm privileged to have a fairly diverse portfolio in a small place. Rockefeller's a small place, and one of the fun parts of my job is it's less siloed than some of the bigger places I've been. And so the activity of the day may be around our construction project that we're building over the FDR. It may be something that would normally be a government affairs person, in which case we don't have an office for that. So when our council member wants to talk to somebody, it's usually me. Just did an event with him last night in Manhattan. And so it's really, that's part of the fun for me. Obviously, I have a lot of planned things, but it's often the unplanned things that become the most important, the unscheduled emergency or opportunity. And that's one of the things I really like about my job, actually.
So for me, it's a mixture of, I mean, I'm still active in research, so there's a mixture of management and scientific research. I'd say maybe 50-50. And I mean, part of that management involves interacting with the various scientists in my department, but also I serve as the point of contact with Germantown, where basic energy science is based. So that's maybe the most important part of being chair, is keeping a good relationship with Germantown and the program managers there, because that's where all our funding comes through. So beyond the management, you know, I'm doing some, since I'm a theorist, I'm doing some sort of calculation, or perhaps talking with one of my collaborators, either here at Brookhaven or elsewhere.
Okay, so when I started the company, I hired 2 people. One is like a bookkeeper and a sort of general management person, and the other one was actually a PhD scientist that could make the products. And even though we've grown, we have now over 100 products. We have like a bookkeeper. We have somebody that handles the, you know, the day-to-day administration, and we have people that work in the lab. What do I do? Well, okay, a perk is that, I mean, I oversee things, but I go in and do research every day. So I'm actually at the bench. I'm not a particularly good manager, so I stick to what I hope I can do some good at. That's my day. But I do have to run into all kinds of problems, like handling, writing patents, applying for grants, and other issues that come up that I have to deal with.
So I have a little bit of an odd job in the sense that I'm a PhD working at a big public university, but I'm not a faculty member. And in some ways, for me, it's personally the perfect job, because in some ways I get a chance to kind of do a little bit of everything that you kind of imagine an academic job path that you're on might be headed towards. So I get a chance to do everything from I write grants, I work on strategic initiatives, I mentor students, I teach workshops, I teach classes. I'm also an instructor for the Alda Center for Communicating Science right now. And so it ends up being sort of a compilation of a lot of the sort of service, committee work, administrative work that you sort of imagine that a faculty member does. I still end up applying for grants and getting money to support some of the things that I do. I still go to conferences, and I still engage in a lot of the professional you know, communities and associations that support the type of work that I do. You know, but I'm an astronomer. I was never in a lab, so it's kind of similar in that way. I sit at a desk with a computer. That's my tool. But what's really exciting compared to some of the policy work that I do is that I really enjoy the fact that I get to work directly with students and with postdocs again. So that's one of the many things that I enjoy about my job.
So now that you've told us what your current your job is, what I'm curious about is, how was your work-life balance as a graduate student and postdoc? And did it improve over time or not? And if not, why? Perhaps you can give us some cautionary advice. Feel free to, I guess, start from the middle this time.
No. Work-life balance. No, I mean, as a postdoc, you really have to, honestly, you have to work very, very long hours in order to hope to be successful. There's not that many academic jobs or academic-like jobs out there, and if you want one, you have to put in the hours. I think that's just something that's true. And for theoretical physics, when you come out of graduate school, you still really know nothing. and you have to do, most of us do 4 or 5 years of postdocs before we get a permanent position. So that was the case for me. So there's 4 or 5 years, well, all of your 20s sort of gone, maybe early 30s. So no, I would not recommend for work-life balance the particular job I have. And it certainly hasn't become easier as chair because I mean, some of the chairs do not do scientific research, but I really want to continue to do that. I wouldn't have accepted being chair if I couldn't continue to do scientific research. So that has also caused issues with work-life balance, I would say.
All right, I'm going to jump in on the postdoc comment there because I also run the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs, and this is a really big issue for me. So I will also throw out there that those of you who are thinking about when to start a family and when is the best time, and you've probably read 18,000 articles on what the right answer is, and the only answer is that there's no good time, right? And so you just need to find the time that's going to work for you in terms of how your career path is going. That being said, there's a big movement right now for institutions to provide better support for family benefits for our postdoctoral scholars. There's actually there's been a big study on that recently. So it's something for those of you who are going out and looking for positions. This is the sort of thing you can ask when you are considering multiple labs at multiple institutions to look at what types of support they might have for those sorts of things. So it's getting better. I don't want to ruin everyone's view on that. Talking about my own personal path, I think that my work-life balance is certainly better now. That's one of the nice things about staying inside academia is that it's a little bit more flexible than a lot of normal jobs where you might need to account for every single minute. Now, that being said, it depends on where you are in the university, how true that may be. There are offices that may be less supportive of that sort of thing, even including at Stony Brook. Myself, I am also part of a two-body problem. Or solution. My husband actually is on the faculty at Stony Brook, and he's actually here at NSLS too. And we sort of got lucky. We met when we were postdocs together down in Washington, D.C., and then that was my immediate next step was going to NSF after that, which happened to be down the street, luckily. And then I followed him for a postdoc here, and I had a job at Stony Brook, then they closed the center that I worked at, but then I got a job that I could telecommute to, so I still lived near Stony Brook and in his house at the same time, which was exciting. And then ended up getting another job at Stony Brook that way. And so my path, I think, has been serendipitous, right? It's, things have worked out well for us, and I think we were open to those sorts of things. I have one kid, and I've gone through what anybody else who has had to deal with childcare costs is that childcare is difficult, and that's also one of those things that's hard on a postdoc salary. But compared to when you were in graduate school and postdoc, certainly it's a lot of work. Once you can manage your own calendar and your own schedule a little bit better, I would wager to say it works a little bit better. But I think you also need to fight for the work balance that you need or that you want in your life. And choosing what types of jobs that you choose for that, I think, is a part of that.
So, yeah, I won't repeat a lot of that good advice because I think it is great advice. But I guess one thing I would add is in thinking about this is the importance of it not being so stark that is work and life balance. I think, and what I'm trying to say is enjoying what you're doing will make it that much easier. And I do think it's probably the case that at least, I don't know if it's completely linear, it bounces around, but I think as I've advanced, I think it has been easier to manage your own calendar. For example, just going from a postdoc to an assistant professor, I think I was probably working the same number of hours, but I was managing it. But I was also so passionate and so excited about what I was doing that it didn't feel like it. In some ways, I look back on when I was an assistant professor, and I know those hours because I was at a place where most of my teaching was at night, and I was still getting there at 8 a.m. Because I had to set up my research program. And it never occurred to me that I was sort of working as hard as I was because I felt so great about what I was doing. And so I think that's an important part of thinking about work-life balance, is how you're feeling about your work. If you're resenting your work, then that might be saying more than just something about the work-life balance.
I just wanted to add that when I was a postdoc, I did my postdoc at the Hutch in Seattle. And so I have met my husband. We met as Sully students back in Argonne National Lab. So we just sort of traveled that journey in so many ways together. But that was long hours. I think when I moved to California to take a position at Onyx Pharmaceuticals, a biotech, it was long ago because I really loved what I was doing. It just didn't feel that much burden. I have 2 kids, so when my kids are still in elementary school, my younger one. So the way we tend to balance it out is we tag team, or one of them sit in my office or in my husband's office, and they, with the hope that one day they will become scientists. But that's how we as a family tend to manage that lifestyle, that balance that we're trying to seek as we try to continue to do what we do. My husband is a theorist, so he needs the computer to the work is a little different for him. For me, when I have a meeting with the teachers, or I have interacting with the scientific staff, or summer comes around and I have all my HSRP kids in the laboratory, the days get a little longer. So it has worked in some way, but I agree, you gotta love the work, and it does feel less. But I personally never made an excuse when I brought my kid to the office, and I used to work at a biotech company, and I just have to bring him over, and I did. And I explained it to my boss. I know my husband is on travel today, and daycare fell through, and here's here. And hopefully it will be all good.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that I wouldn't say it's so much of a problem. I got married right after college and had 2 children by the time I was in graduate school. So, balancing the whole thing, I mean, a scientific life is not too different from other 9-to-5 jobs, except that, it's if you are following your passion to do research. So you factor that in, and if you're going to work on weekends, it's kind of your choice. But otherwise, I would say you can balance it, yes.
Oh, if you have a question, just walk up to the microphone.
I'm just sort of curious, how competitive were the positions you're in now? Was there like, how many people were sort of applying for your jobs, or how many people did you have to sort of,
Oh, I thought you meant like, is it competitive on a day-to-day?
Yeah, no, competitive, like, like, were there a lot of job applicants and things like that, or was it just like, you're the person for the job and they just hired you?
Maybe give a number for a number of job applicants and number that are actually qualified.
I think it's so specific to these various positions. I mean, the position I'm in now, it was an executive position at the university, so they had a search firm, and I happened to know that there was probably a handful of people that the president met with. But as I alluded to earlier, I think it just moved pretty quickly once we met. But that's kind of it's such a unique, it's a different situation than jobs that are posted and have people apply for them. Once you have a search firm involved, it sort of flips the process a little bit from applying to something to the search firm scouring and trying to generate source candidates. Where for people who, like I was, not looking for a job. I was sitting, at Yale University, very, very happy. As an aside, the thing I loved about my job at Yale, it was the only time I was working outside of just the life sciences. So my portfolio in the provost's office at Yale included physical sciences, engineering, a bunch of things, and it was so much fun getting to know the culture and the currency of different scientists, including one of my favorites were astronomers, because they didn't need a lot of lab space. They just want night. No, they're not. They're not cheap because they want nights on really expensive telescopes.
Well, yeah, if you're not already a partner in that telescope.
So for me, I mean, to become the chair of a division has a number of requirements. You need to be an okay scientist. You need to know DOE culture. That's because, again, you're probably the thing that's most crucial is communication with Washington and maintaining good communication with Washington, which means you have to understand what they want. And so there wasn't really that many people available in the division at the time. In fact, probably shouldn't say this with Bob Tribble in the audience, but I was told, it's not that you're the best, you're the only one. So there was one.
We're done.
You aren't all obliged to answer every question. So next.
Yeah. What are the traits that you think hallmark a good or ideal PhD student or postdoc?
Good at what?
What are the traits that hallmark a good or ideal PhD student or postdoc? Character traits.
Well, okay, hardworking, smart, and committed. Next.
Well, okay, I'll throw in something else to think about for those of you who are postdocs or thinking about being postdocs. I mean, you guys all know what it takes to be good at what you're doing, right? Like, you need to think creatively, you need to be a good problem solver, you need to work hard, you have to expect long hours, et cetera, et cetera. You need to, be ready to learn new things very, very quickly. One thing to think about if you want to be a postdoc, or for those of you who are postdocs now, is depending on where you want to go, the postdoc is an opportunity to really broaden your skill set. Okay, so for those of you who are thinking about the postdoc as a time to just kind of finish up your papers from your PhD, really think about what are the new skills, the new tools, the new techniques, the new connections, the new projects, the new directions that you might be able to take your science in. So for example, if you don't end up in an academic job, for example, if you want to go into private industry and do that sort of R&D, a lot of companies, they might prefer hiring a PhD student over a postdoc unless that postdoc can demonstrate that they use their postdoc in order to really broaden themselves or diversify their skill set in some way. So I encourage all of you to think about in terms of not just papers, not just numbers, but also think about yourselves in terms of what are the skills that you're gaining, how can you describe those skills, how can you document those skills in your CV so that wherever you go, whether it's into an academic job, whether it's doing a startup, whether it's going to administration, doing education, you're going to be able to market yourself and talk knowledgeably about all the things that you can do, not just that one title of what you've done, PhD student or postdoc.
While we're on that topic, perhaps some of you could mention if there was any point during your career where you thought about leaving research and going into another field like finance or data science, and what made you stay? Or were you always all dedicated to doing research?
Well, so I started thinking about alternatives to academics, or certainly to alternatives to research, probably as a postdoc. Even though I knew I was going to apply for some academic jobs, I was thinking this was in the mid to late 90s, and I really got intrigued by alternatives. At the time, educational software was sort of a growing field and a new field, and I also knew that one of the things I was passionate about was teaching. That was not, when I say academics and being a professor, it's not just research. I was very passionate about teaching, and so I considered that as an alternative. I ended up not doing that, obviously, but I did make a switch in the middle of my postdoc career from being a scientist and doing science to supporting science. And that basically came down, in my case, to where I thought I could make the bigger impact, where I could make a bigger contribution. And I just felt like me doing my research program, collaborating with others, et cetera, I enjoyed, but I felt like I would be better at and be able to make a better contribution and more impactful contribution by supporting science.
I'll just add something. So I think you look at us and you see, oh, look at all those successful people up here on the stage, but it's been a rough road. So, okay, I'll admit, I was thinking about changing careers when I was at Brookhaven because, you know, as a starting scientist here, I try to get tenure, and actually I got this result. So I went looking for an industry job at Grumman, and but after traveling there for an hour and a half every day with stop-and-go traffic on the expressway, I decided to stay at Brookhaven. So even in my 32 years, I never got tenure here, but you know, I kind of stuck with it, and so things aren't always as perfect as you know, it's a tough road.
Yeah, my question was partly answered when you were talking about broadening your skill set, but I'd like to ask it anyway to get everybody else's idea. So I've just started my first postdoc. Obviously, it's important to do really good research, publish papers, but what are the other key things that I should be thinking about or trying to do at this stage in my career? And I'm sure there are others who are in a similar position.
So the question is, what other things, while you're doing a postdoc, should you be trying to pick up? Is that right?
Yeah, like what are the key things to think about during your first postdoc?
Yeah, so I'll give specific advice. I think there may be more generic advice as well. It gets back to my theme of being opportunistic. In my case, you know, like most of us, we picked a postdoc based on a scientific interest, as well as ideally a good interpersonal skill set with the mentor. What I didn't really realize, but again, I took advantage of this when I was doing my postdoc, was my postdoc advisor was not only an incredibly gifted writer, but he was also just a great scientific communicator and a promoter of scientific communication. And so that was a specific skill that I wasn't necessarily looking at when I was picking a postdoc. But between the writing and just things I still remember to this day, the writing in general, scientific communicating in general, and even figure legends. He had this thing about, you know, you shouldn't have to go digging into the paper. You should be able to look at a figure, read the figure legend, and you're helping the reader interpret it. So there were some big lessons, some smaller lessons, but that's a particular skill that I think I got out of this postdoc. And again, it was serendipitous, but once I realized that the opportunity was there, I tried to take advantage of it.
Maybe I could emphasize, again, interpersonal skills. I think the most successful postdocs in my division have been people who've not just sort of narrowly worked with their advisor, but actually gone out and worked with other people in the division, done synergistic research. And that takes a certain interpersonal skill set, which not everybody has naturally. So that would be something I think would be, and I mean, it's another way of saying that would be networking. Because of course, the more people you work with, more broadly you're going to be known, and the better you have for succeeding.
All right, I have to throw out one more thing. Sorry, this is my jam. I do with postdocs. I really strongly encourage you guys to think long and hard and actually write down, like on a piece of paper or on a computer screen, actually write down some career goals and think about the action items that you can check off this year that are going to help you get where it is you're wanting to go. And so my real answer to what you should be doing in order to get where you want to go, first is to figure out where you want to go, and then do some research about the things that you need in order to get there. So for example, if communicating science skills are going to be really key wherever it is you want to go, then find some ways to build those particular skills. Can you help writing a grant and build your writing skills? Can you give more talks? Can you talk B&L into bringing the Alda Center in even more often to do workshops on communicating science here? Take classes at the university, et cetera. Whatever those extra skills are, I highly recommend, like, find someone who has the job that you think you want and go do an informational interview with that person Ask them the same kinds of questions that we're being asked today. What's your day like? What kind of skills do you use? Do you still feel like a scientist if you're not doing science anymore? How connected are what you do today to the skills and the training that you had before? What's one skill you wish you had worked on when you were at my career stage? Ask them those questions. And the thing about informational interviews is everybody likes to talk about themselves, right? So it's pretty easy to find someone who will be willing to have that conversation with you.
Hi. Okay, so this is going to be sort of directed at you generally, like most of the other questions. And it's sort of a two-part. So first, I'm wondering if we've been talking about some character traits, I guess, of PhD students, and I'd like to reflect that on you. What are some things that characteristically you embody that you found have been really helpful in just doing your job? Or maybe the contrary, things that you really don't like or you find very difficult? And then the second question, and you can feel free to answer either or both or whatever, is at any point in your career, what's something that you feel like maybe you really screwed up and you would completely do over or wish you had the chance to change?
Well, maybe I'll take a stab at the first one while I think about the second one. I guess in terms of additional things that maybe we haven't said already, I think, at least in my case, well, and I think that's an important thing, I think you'd really need to know yourself, because when I was looking at positions, let's say coming out of a postdoc, I knew that for me, actually, geography was important. And there were other people in the lab that didn't care about geography. They just wanted to be at either the best school or the top position they could get. But for me, that wasn't going to be the case, and so that was different, and I had to accept that and know that about myself. So I think knowing what's important to you, to your point of writing down things about yourself. For me, I'm also, it's really important to me to have people at my workplace that I really like, enjoy, and respect and admire. And so I'm not sort of, I'm not going to be happy being a lone scientist sitting in a lab doing science by myself. And so that was really important, identifying places where I knew I could interact with really great people. That, again, was part of the theme I alluded to earlier. Great places working with great people. And that doesn't just mean Research One institutions, by the way. When my first job out of a postdoc was at City College of New York. It was in New York, which is geography was important to me. I'd never lived in New York. I grew up on the West Coast, but I had really thought I liked New York a lot from visiting, and I wanted to be in a great place. One of my passions at that time was, and still is trying to do something about the dearth of underrepresented minorities in science, and having a faculty job at a place where there's 150 languages spoken in the cafeteria every day that was fantastic for me. To be able to make that contribution in something that I felt passionate about. That was again, not an institution that people look at and say that's a world-class research institution, but it helped me enable me to do the things I wanted to do, to feel like I was making a contribution.
For the work that I do at the office, I think a trait I guess we all have as educators here and BNL is that I have to, even though my PhD is in life sciences, it's in microbiology, because the work that I do, I have to be able to be open to learning other new topics that I may not be comfortable learning about. And because, if I have to mentor a student or try to find a mentor for that student during the summer, I have to be able to have an understanding what that research is about. So being able to be open and to learning other information than studies yours that you're comfortable with. And personally, I would say sometimes it's just taking a risk in things that you may not be comfortable at times, but just trusting that, taking a risk once in a while, I think is a good thing. It teaches you what kind of person you are, and also it allows you to discover skills that you didn't know that you had them until you actually take that risk. And so certainly my position here at BNL, I have done both, and so that has been something positive.
Well, if I understood part of the question, it was like mistakes. And so going back, if I had to do it over again, okay, I wouldn't do what I did, and maybe advise you, take it or leave it. Actually, I think if you're interested in research and scientific research, I would say try to get a job at a teaching university, you know, like Stony Brook or so forth. Because I was in postdoc with a friend of mine, and he went and got a eventually tenured position at Stony Brook University. Okay, and comparing our two career paths, I think he came out a lot better. For one thing, at a company, you have to pay for everything. Like you have to come up with your salary. For example, we apply for patents. Well, a patent can cost up to like $40,000 or $50,000 each, and you have to find the money for that if you're going to do it. And if you go international, it could be $300,000. Now, at a university, all you do is you turn in a little document saying what your idea is, and they have a department that takes it to the to patent lawyers. They pay for it. Everything's paid for. And then, as a matter of fact, at Stony Brook, the conditions are that if it actually makes money someday, the inventor gets 40%. That's not a bad deal for like writing a one-page thing and turning it in. It's amazing, actually. Whereas at a company, you have to come up with salaries. You have to worry about all kinds of other problems. At a university, they have departments that do that, and people that are hired to do all that for you. So I would think very strongly about starting your own company. Certainly, Bill Gates, and I mean, there's some superstars out there that started in their garages. So, it happens. But for the average, for most of the rest of us, it's a tough road. So, and also I would recommend probably a teaching university over a place like Brookhaven. Sorry. Because actually, when I worked at Brookhaven, I had to get grants to support my work here. And actually, I'm kind of amazed that I lasted like 32 years. But eventually, the grants became more competitive, and my field was like more well-known at the time. And I ran out of, I didn't get a grant. And although some departments at Brookhaven work off like a large block of money from DOE that they can distribute to like the physics department or high energy physics, in biology, it's get your own grant or leave. So actually, at some point, that's why I left Brookhaven. I got laid off. So however, if you can get tenure at a university, okay, I'm going back to my friend over there. He has tenure. He tells me a lot of tenured people don't even come into work. That they, and when they get up and they have very little teaching responsibility. He has a lab. He has people. I mean, I'm not saying you should goof off, but it's a much different environment. And if you're really interested in concentrating on scientific research, that's my recommendation of where you should go.
Well, I have one last question. We talked quite a bit about like your careers and how you got where you are now. Why don't you very quickly just go through what are your like hobbies and activities outside work, if you have any left?
All right, I'll start. I will admit that I am a closet writer, and I just started National Novel Writing Month yesterday because it was November 1st. And I'm officially 7,000 words into my 5,000 words for the month.
Well, I took up windsurfing, but then when I couldn't make it back to shore, I kind of eventually gave that up. But I'm pretty devoted to my work right now. I'm working on cancer therapies. It's very time consuming and it's extremely challenging. So I spend most of my time, weekends, evenings, like reading articles, trying to, work more on that.
I'm originally from Western Canada, Calgary, and Calgary is near the Rocky Mountains, which growing up I spent a lot of time in, and so whenever I can, I do try to go back. At least once a year, I spend a week camping in the backcountry around Banff.
I grew up playing a lot of sports, and about 12 years ago, on my 40th birthday, I dunked a basketball on my 40th birthday. That was the last time I dunked a basketball. So I've spent a lot of time trying to find sports where the ratio of enjoyment to injury is correct. And then, as I've mentioned New York a few times, I try to take advantage of the fact that I really do love the city I work in. Both for, actually less for things like, Broadway and things that are touristy things, but just the fact that, on the weekends I can get into the park, Central Park, with my dog before 9, and traipse around for miles and miles. And so doing things like that is a blast for me.
I like making beer, so that's what I do.
I like
when I
drinking
have
beer.
time. When I have time, we make beer. It's just because we started back when we were graduate students, because we thought it was a cheap way to bring beer. But we enjoy it actually, and putting stuff together. And just to say what Robert said, I grew up in Puerto Rico, so when I have chance, I go home and be on the beach once in a while, and then come back to the cold weather here.
Sorry, I'm afraid we're out of time, but...
I wanted to thank you so much for being open and sharing your lives with us. And what are your future aspirations? Or like now what's next? Or what drives you? What do you see in your upcoming careers at this level in your life right now?
Please answer quickly.
So it's an easy one for me. I keep coming back to the same theme. I don't plan ahead like that. If something comes up, it's opportunistic. I'm really happy where I am. I think it's sustainable where I am, so I don't have a clock ticking, which is a fortunate thing. And if something comes along, it will be working with great people at a great institution and an opportunity to do great things.
Likewise, I don't have a plan. Whatever, if some opportunity comes up and it's a good opportunity, then take advantage of it.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It's, so far my career's been marked by chance, and I would expect it would continue to some degree to be marked by chance.
So we got far enough to get some nice results with this nanoparticle treatment in mice, and in other words, like the particle absorbs X-rays and then increases the dose. So in tumor animals, we can extend the life 3 times over the normal life over the normal treatment. So a big challenge for me is now to go to the FDA. I've never done it before. As a small company, we have to somehow fund it. I'm sure some of or can imagine some of the costs involved and so on and so forth. So this is going to be a huge challenge in the future that I'm trying to address.
I'll just say ditto. I'm not really sure where I'm headed from here, but hopefully it'll be just as much fun.
Okay, well, with that, I'd like to thank our career panelists.